Hello there. Welcome to the IWS podcast. I'm your host, RJ, and I have a very special guest today, my man Carlos Del Rio. How are you doing today, Carlos?
Doing fantastic, brother. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, man. I know we had a very riveting and exciting conversation a couple of days ago.
To
So
say the least.
hopefully we'll capture some of that magic again as we go through and actually get to record it this time. But I really appreciate you for being here. I think we're going to have a very engaging discussion that a lot of the listeners will be able to appreciate and hopefully take something away from the conversation. So I always like to begin and start by letting the guest give a little bit of background about who they are, where they're from, and really talking a bit more about their family dynamics and their environment. Because in my experience, for a lot of us, that really shapes our perception as we get older. So if you don't mind, if you could talk a little bit about your lived experiences growing up in your household.
For sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, my name is Carlos Del Rio. I am 26 years old. My dynamics are pretty interesting, I would say, but a blessing and I would say a lot of fun. I was born in the Dominican Republic. It was a little tiny island in the Caribbean, right next to Puerto Rico, right next to Cuba, right next to Jamaica. Paradise, truly amazing. Really, honestly, can't phrase it better. It was wonderful growing up there. I would always be in nature. There was, beaches, rivers all the time. Um, my parents specifically, like, they actually got separated when I was about four.
Mm,
Um, and my dad used to travel a lot, like, and I mean, like, out of the country. He was either in Venezuela, Puerto Rico, or here in the U.S. So I wouldn't see him very much. Um, it was it was cool. Like he would call as much as possible. He would never miss my birthday and stuff like that. He would always try his best, which was wonderful. Like even though my parents were separated, they had a really nice communication. Like they would make sure that
mm,
um, I will have both my parents in my life, which is amazing. I know that not a lot of people get that blessing. Um,
beautiful.
and once I turned about 10 or 12, I actually started traveling myself. And this is why I say it becomes a little bit more interesting because I would do a year with my dad and a year with my mom.
Oh
So I would
wow.
be, yeah, so I would be, I did a year in Puerto Rico, a year in Dominican Republic, a year in New Jersey, 2 years in New Jersey, and then 2 years in the Dominican Republic. And by this time, I'm in high school, right? So I did half of high school in the Dominican Republic, and I finished high school in New Jersey.
Okay.
Um, I grew up in Passaic, New Jersey, which is the hood, for lack of better words. Like there was gang violence, there was a lot of poverty, a lot of scarcity mentality. It was at the time I didn't know, like it was the United States, so I was like I don't know, like I made it, it's cool.
Yeah.
But once I went into college actually, and I went to William Patterson University. It's like basically the suburbs in northern Jersey,
Okay.
about 30 minutes from New York City. um, I That's kind of when I learned that I was from the hood, because I was surrounded by a lot of wealthier individuals,
Yeah.
and they were like, wait, there were gang fights after school. I'm like, yeah, like all the time. You guys didn't get that? Like I don't. So
Like man, a little different, a little different.
a little different. But yeah, like when I got there, I was like, I realized I'm like, oh, so like not everyone would dress up like this. All right, cool. But
Hmm.
it was awesome. Like I was always social because I was always traveling. So like I made friends and stuff like that. That I still like friendships that I still hold to this day. Um, Graduated from there, got my bachelor's in psychology. Eventually moved to Arizona, where I live now. I live in Phoenix, Arizona right now. And uh, about what, like this year actually, I just got my master's in special education and applied behavior analysis. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, and yeah, so it's been a lot of traveling, but it's honestly been wonderful, and I've had the blessing of always having both my parents in my life. um, and yeah, like it's been that's about it for my background.
Man, that's
It's
that's ex-
consistent.
that's extensive though. I mean,
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
we gotta make sure we unpack and appreciate the gravity of everything you laid out there. I mean,
Mhm.
for me, I would say number one, I'm always a big fan of when I hear that parents, regardless of whether you're together or not, that you effectively communicate and co-parent together, right?
Mhm.
Because every child needs both of their parents involved in their life. And so I'm glad that regardless of whether they were together or not, that they seemed like from your perspective that they were able to work effectively together. Now on the
Definitely.
flip side, man, talk about a journey of traveling. You're right. Like I feel much more stationary compared to you. You over here like I was in DR, I was in PR, I was in New Jersey. I'm all over the place.
Yeah,
But it seems like you were very much embracing that type of maybe nomadic lifestyle, if you will.
definitely.
So it seemed like that worked for you. And then you said, finishing up school here in New Jersey. So I'm sure that was maybe a little different of experience compared to doing high school in DR. But I want to go back to what you were talking about, recognizing you were from the hood, right? Because I think that the reason that goes to the crux of why I even asked the question. You don't know anything different because it's all you know, right? For you, it might be a little different because you actually traveled to different countries and you had to live in different environments. So maybe there was some compare and contrast. But for a lot of us, when we are relatively stationary, meaning maybe I grew up in one, possibly two places. Maybe we moved once in my childhood, but for the most part, we stayed somewhere for a period of years before we would leave. It might be much harder to really conceptualize what you just said. I don't even recognize that I lived in these types of environments because it's all I knew. It's not until you meet other people who, like you pointed out, didn't experience a lot of these things. Maybe they didn't hear gunshots. Maybe there weren't liquor stores on all the corners.
Every corner.
Maybe there weren't carjackings or people getting robbed or people
Mhm.
generally feeling unsafe. Maybe the schools in their environments, like the public schools or private schools, were in better condition, better funded. We
Mhm.
don't know any of that stuff until we actually compare it, until somebody else tells us something different to challenge what we think to be true. And that's the main reason why I haven't asked those questions, because we don't know any better until we usually become of age. And hopefully we've had an opportunity to challenge our thinking and maybe evolve in some ways. So I'm hoping that somebody might maybe be able to appreciate what you were laying out there. Cause I think for a lot of us, we don't recognize it until we get into a rough situation and realize maybe that hasn't impacted us for a very, very long time and we just weren't really aware of it. So that can
Definitely.
be that can be very it can be an interesting dynamic to try to learn to appreciate.
Yeah,
Um,
I learned that you sometimes you carry things with you that you don't know you're carrying.
hmm
Um, so like that awareness and especially that exposure to other cultures and other ideas, I believe really helped shaped who I am today and really allowed me to like honestly, for lack of better words, to level up.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think that's why I love what we're doing right now because that exposure really is powerful.
hmm
Um,
No, I'm with it, man. That's a big part of the platform is hoping that other people, but particularly other men and young men, can maybe appreciate a bit of what we're discussing because hopefully some of it resonates with them and they see that there can be more to life than maybe what they see only in their immediate environment, you know, because seeing is believing, as we say, and it's hard to imagine things you don't have around you, you don't get to witness personally. So hopefully this will help somebody. But piggybacking on what you were mentioning at the end about your education, getting that master's in special education and behavior analysis, I want to ask you a little bit about some of your time, maybe in your career, that you may have had an opportunity to work in the field. Like, what motivated you to help you to want to earn that degree?
yeah, for sure. So to a little bit of background, I like most Latinos, especially, I wanted to be a doctor, medical doctor when I went to college
Mm-hmm.
for my bachelor's. I was going to get biology and all that, and like go for pre med. Um, but I ended up taking psychology 101, and I like just clicked, fell in love with it. To be honest,
Mm-hmm.
I honestly didn't know anything about it, but I knew that it was my calling. So I decided to go for it. Again, my parents are super supportive, so they're like, "Yeah, like we got you. As long as you're continuing to move forward, it's all good." Um, but while I was getting my bachelor's, I was working at restaurants. I was working. I was just doing whatever I need to do to
Yeah.
pay for my bills.
Correct.
Because I had books to buy. I had car payments, all this stuff. So I worked at multiple different restaurants. I worked at fast food. I worked at fine dining. I did management. I did bartending. I did a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But when I graduated, I was introduced to the opportunity here in Arizona to come work at a charter school with kids with autism.
Oh, okay.
Um, so, like while I was in Jersey, I basically met a friend who worked here, and he told me that he would love to introduce me to his leaders and everything, and see if it's in alignment. So honestly, I sent my resume virtually. They told me they were very interested. So I grabbed my savings. I came out here. I basically interviewed, had a job here 7 days after moving here right away. So that was really helpful for sure.
Yeah.
And I had love for the autistic community because I grew up. One of my cousins actually, he's about a year older than me, and we grew up together in DR. And he never had services. He never actually got. It was his
Mm,
mom doing everything,
mm,
and now he's a grown man and everything, and he never actually has services. So I knew that I needed to do something to like learn how I can help that community.
yeah.
And like I never have anything against like starting from the bottom, especially if you don't know anything. So
Sure.
I started as a teacher's assistant, basically providing behavioral support. I was working with like the toughest cases in the school. I was dealing with aggression. I was dealing with um, bites, like literally anything that you can imagine, like chairs flying, punches, all the things. Like I was trained in restraints and all that stuff. um, and I worked there for about a year. But the last few months, actually, my teacher was absent like a lot of the time. She had a lot
Yeah.
going on, like most teachers do. Like they have a lot to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but that meant that I had to step into the teacher position. So I would literally have four classrooms that would rotate of kids of different age groups, of different behavioral like needs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I would work individually with all of the kids. And that was definitely very challenging. After that, I realized that I do not want to do that. Uh, I was like, nope,
Like, that was enough of that.
that's enough of that. Did it for that year. And I ended up actually getting multiple offers for clinics all over the valley that wanted me to work for them because, like, bilingual, a male with behavioral experience and a psychology degree. Like it they I wasn't concerned about getting a job.
Hmm.
That's my point. So I ended up choosing a really awesome clinic actually that had beautiful supervisors, like really knowledgeable supervisors who knew a lot about the field, and they did training, both group and a lot of one-on-one training as well. So anything that I needed, they were right there to give me feedback and help me out.
Yeah.
Um, it went from me working at a classroom to working one-on-one with the kiddos. So that was a lot of weight off my shoulders as well because I had a classroom of like 8, 9 kids, all
Yeah.
behavioral, to moving to one kid at a time. Again, here I still was working with like the toughest cases, the most not toughest, but the most challenging cases. Um, a lot of kids that were nonverbal, a lot of kids that aggress, that engage in self-injurious behavior, whether it was biting themselves, whether there was there was a lot of that for sure.
Yeah.
I love the work. It was incredibly rewarding. The parents love me. The kids love me. I love the work itself. I got a promotion, so I was making more money. I felt great, honestly. Like I loved it. Soon after that, I got accepted into my master's program. So I'm like everything's coming together beautifully. Like this is great. And I got accepted into my master's program February of 2020. So
Well,
I was like, this is great. I have
I
so
think we know what
many,
happened the next month.
I was like, I had savings growing. Like I was like, everything's coming together beautifully. And then the clinic started closing out. Parents started taking their kiddos out of sessions, which meant I would literally just lose like chunks of 8 hours per week, just
Yeah.
because I wouldn't have a client. And I had trips that I had to cancel and everything like that, all of that. But I was like, okay, cool. Like it's all good. But at the time, I had this idea that we'll get back to the normal, like whatever that normal meant. I was like, we'll get back to it, this
Hmm.
and that. The clinic just kept having to close, or like parents would literally take their kids out and like my finances were taking a hit, but I loved the work. It was in alignment with the schooling that I was getting, and a
Hmm.
lot of my supervisors already had the master's that the degree that I was in pursuit of.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll do it. It's so good. I was basically working part time at the clinic, so I decided to start my own business. Like literally just did virtual coaching because everyone was asking me like, "Yo, how are you staying in shape during the pandemic?" And I was like, "Cool." So I started doing coaching for friends and family, and I would just do virtual coaching like Zoom
Yeah.
calls and stuff like that. I would write programs for them using behavioral principles and the stuff that I've learned in my own experience. Um, so amazing results. Like literally, it was really rewarding work as well.
Mm.
I was exhausted because I have my own business. I had to do social media. I had my master's program. I had to get supervision hours. It was wild, and I did that for a whole year. I did it all the way to like literally July, not July, yeah, June 2021.
Okay.
But a month before that, before and these dates are important because by that time I started realizing like, hey, like this is not sustainable. This is not something that like I want to continue to do. Um, and my wake up call was when I was diagnosed with depression in May of 2021, and I was really confused. I was like, "Wait, what?" But like, I don't understand. Like, I have psychology degrees. I have an amazing support system. Like I understand that like COVID just happened. There was a lot of trauma. Like, I know
Sure.
all of that stuff, but like, I don't understand like why I have literal clinical depression. And I went to a psychotherapist. Not, yeah, not psycho, yeah, a psychiatrist actually. I went to. I wish I went to a psychotherapist. I went to a psychiatrist, and I had 2 sessions with him, basically 2 really short sessions, and he immediately just here meds. You're just give me the antidepressant meds. I honestly, he never really asked me about my habits. He never really asked me about my diet. He really never asked me. He never even proposed some coping skills before actually moving into medication.
Got it. Got it.
And yeah, like I ended up doing what he told me and everything like that. The following month, the same month that I quit my job, I put my month notice. I got a call from my dad's friend telling me that he fell victim to alcoholism. Like he ended up like really, really, really ill. I took a flight out there while in my master's program, so I was literally getting my master's while helping him like get everything under control, cleaning his room, calling his insurance company to get him help and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, and he was not about it because he's a macho man, and he is not going to get help from people. So I only
Right.
had a week there. Yeah, I only had a week there. So I did the best that I could. I sat with him. I helped him out the best that I could. I called his insurance. I literally set I scheduled appointments for him and everything. Um, but then I had to go back, and when I came back um, to work, my boss told me that because I already resigned, the PTO that I accrued for 2 years working there wasn't they weren't gonna honor it. So
Wow.
I didn't know how I was gonna pay rent the following month. I was like, wait, what? Okay,
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy, and I was like in awe. But honestly, at this like the following month, I actually started a strategic partnership with a superfood company here actually here in California, that like allowed me to really step into what I wanted to do and my mission of like basically sharing the message of generational health and wealth with our communities.
Hmm.
And I was able to do that and use that as a vehicle to do my business, which at the time what I wanted to do was do like coaching sessions for kids with autism, basically health and fitness, because I saw a lot of problems in that area and no
Yeah.
support in the entire valley. And um yeah, so after that like I really stepped into my business, and ever since then like um it's just been growing, and it's been like just been wonderful. And now that I graduated, now I can actually have a lot more time.
Sure.
And
Sure.
yeah, and I've been diving into my business, and yeah, like it's been going amazingly for sure. Like and I'm doing presentations in front of like so many people in Spanish and English, and like really doing what I feel like I'm called for.
Yeah.
And
Yes, sir. No, we love that, man. I mean,
yeah,
again, you said so many good things there. I
Yeah,
appreciate all the vulnerability. Like
for sure.
I think it's so important to acknowledge that, because they have so many different things that are going on in life in real time, and trying to navigate that and balance that, it can be very, very challenging, which is exactly what I digested from what you said, trying
Mhm,
to manage going to grad school, trying to navigate family challenges if if a loved one falls ill, trying to navigate financial hardship when you
mhm.
having that issue. Like, that is really unfortunate that you weren't able to utilize your PTO. Like that,
2
that can
years.
hurt a lot of people. Yeah, you said 2 years. Like that's really hard to to deal with. So shout out to
Mhm,
you for being able to make it through that. But regardless, you found a way not only to get through that point, but then an important thing I think that you mentioned that I want to make sure I highlight is I decided to then start to work for myself,
mhm.
and recognizing that there was a change of the work dynamic. Because, and this happened to a lot of people, right? In the pandemic, I had a position, it's not here anymore. Or I have a position, hours got reduced. So
Mhm,
I have to find a way to make it through. How am I going to make ends meet? And some of us pivoted and tried to do something else. Even maybe while we were doing our normal job, maybe we just left it all together because maybe it wasn't there anymore.
mhm,
And I can really resonate with you, man, because
mhm,
like you in that regard, I worked at a school, and they were slowly reducing hours and reducing hours. It was a college, but the point
mhm,
was the ability to provide was being impacted. And
mhm.
at some point got faced with a similar decision that it sounds like you did as well. I got to decide, am I going to keep kind of waiting for them to hopefully help me out, or for things to
Mhm.
resume normalcy, or I got to try something different? And I opted to go into full private practice for myself. So I can definitely empathize with you going to do things on your own. And I think, there is a certain level of freedom, obviously, being able to do things of your own accord. But obviously, there's more risk. So you got to be comfortable with making sure that you're doing everything possible to not only survive, but thrive.
It's
So
a lot of
I,
challenges. Yeah, it's a lot
oh,
of
yeah.
challenges and things that you have to learn when you go into
Oh,
business.
yes.
So, like, it's a
Oh,
lot
yes.
of like just a lot of high expectations that you kind of have to detach from,
Hmm.
especially and it's but it's an amazing, like, honestly, I feel like it has been the most powerful learning experience of my life.
Yeah.
Even though I've only been doing it for about 2 years, I've gained so much knowledge about myself, about how business works, about the world, that I always recommend that to people. Like, if that's an option, like, at least look into it.
Hmm.
Look into it. Yeah, especially like people like you and I who have specialized knowledge in something. Um, it, I wanted to make sure that I serve as many people as possible, and at the time of the clinic, I wasn't doing that.
Right. Right.
So by stepping in like into my own business, I was able to help more people, and now I'm literally helping more people than I really thought it was possible. Like, if you asked me a year ago, I was like, no, that's not true.
Yeah, no, you're
uh,
you're right. You're right, man. Especially with, which I think was also cool, is being
mhm,
able to have this space, like being more,
mhm,
many people being more open to the idea of doing things virtually, right? Because
yes.
I'll say in the field of mental health, we
Mhm,
are definitely old school in that way. Very much, you come in, you sit down, and we do the work in that traditional sort of way. Um, Things got very interesting, just like what you said, going into March of 2020, because many industries, I know mental health was not just one of them, but many industries had to learn to do things virtually. And some of us had never been trained or prepped on how to do that. So we had to do these things on the fly. But as you said just a moment ago, seeing as where we're at today, how you can get a lot of services done virtually. You can get groceries brought to you. You can order a lot of things online. Like there has been a certain level of, I think, access that maybe
mhm,
wasn't there. So just to give like a quick example, in mental health, a lot of times you would be locked to maybe the immediate vicinity or region that you're in. Like
mhm,
maybe that's the city, maybe that's the town, right? Because the expectation would have been people need to come to you. In some cases, you might go to them, but more often than not, you want them to come to you.
mhm,
That wouldn't be practical if they're like 3 hours away. Like they're not going to do that once a week or
mhm,
even
yeah,
once every other week. They probably don't want to have to do that. But when you have this idea of telehealth and being able to do sessions virtually, well, now I've unlocked the entire state. Now I can see anybody in my state. So, and then if you're licensed in multiple states, then you can see them wherever you are. But the point is, it increased the availability and the accessibility for a lot of us. So that was a big change. And when you talked about doing virtual coaching, I'm sure that that maybe made it a little bit easier as well, because you have potential clients that are more open minded to that idea and not thinking like, oh, I only need to be sitting in front of you in order for this to be effective. But I don't know
Right.
if you want to add anything to that.
No, definitely. I mean, honestly, I 100% agree with that. Like my clients, when I was doing the virtual coaching for when I first started, I had clients in New Jersey, I had clients in Pennsylvania, living here all the way here in Arizona. So
Hmm.
that definitely really helped, and especially during the pandemic when we couldn't even actually see each other. Like
Yes.
there was people that I couldn't work with. Like even if I wanted to, I couldn't really coach them 1-on-one in person. So the virtual side of things really helped in reaching a higher population of people. And yeah, like it's powerful. It's powerful for sure.
No, I agree, man. I think that has been, it's hard to find things to be optimistic about from the
Mhm.
pandemic, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But
Oof. Yeah.
that's one of the things that I think is a general takeaway is accessibility. Now, is it maybe to the scale that we would like where everybody can access everything? No, of course not. But I think it is better than maybe it would have been had we not made those adjustments. Because then a lot more people would be having hardship or difficulty or possibly suffering because they can't get access to people because, yes, we were at different points not able to see anybody. So I
Hmm.
think that's one of those things that, it's a very strange way to some to look at it, but sometimes there are ways and things that you can take from horrible situations, challenging situations, difficult situations, but you just got to be willing to try a different lens. But and kind of speaking about that, when you were talking about getting depressed and getting diagnosed from that psychiatrist, because I want to make sure I go back to that. Do you remember, outside of just seeking out the services from the psychiatrist, did you ever try to seek out any other services from a mental health provider, either at that time or even in the past?
So honestly, no. I didn't really look too much to keep it 100 with you.
Hmm.
I was in a really deep hole. I just needed help,
Yeah, yeah,
and my finances were tough. Like we're in a really rough position as well. So I just needed to make sure, like, I needed to get someone that I can and like actually pay for. But I also didn't want to settle for someone that like didn't know what they were doing. So I looked for some of the top people here in the state. Um, but that also meant that my most of my insurance wouldn't cover it, and
yeah,
the medication wasn't covered under my insurance and stuff like that. So I didn't actually like look around too much. I just as a Latino male, for me to just even find somebody was an amazing like it was
yeah.
just I yo you did it, wow, that was awesome. Because I
Hmm.
didn't have anyone around me, I didn't know anyone in my family who ever especially males in my family who search for services. So I didn't even know who to look for. I literally felt like I was by myself,
Yeah.
and I found somebody. I was like, okay, they're knowledgeable, whatever. I went with them, and eventually, like, I realized that that wasn't the person for me. And luckily, I had the presence of mind to move away from that person because
Mm.
that wasn't the person for me. uh, but like most people don't understand that you can look around. And at the time, like even though I did know that I could look around, I was so confident in this doctor, and I was so basically blinded by the degrees and like the high rise office and all that stuff. Like I was like, oh, like yeah, they know what they're talking about and everything
Hmm.
like that. But um, again, to be vulnerable and keep it 100, like I was given medication without even actually trying to solve the problem of the root. Like they were kind of just like it was like a coating on top of my problems.
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't feel my feelings. I honestly felt like a robot. I felt like I was living on autopilot. But I listened. I followed the prescription because that's another thing that I know that a lot of Latino community doesn't do. They don't follow prescriptions. So I'm
Hmm.
like, okay. No, I'm gonna do I'm gonna do what he's telling
I'm gonna do
me.
what they're telling me to do.
Yeah, because otherwise, like, I wanted to not just say like, oh, like I changed my mind. Like I want, like I listened to exactly what he told me to do. Um, I honestly felt like a little bit better, but still didn't really. I wasn't um anywhere close to where I wanted to be.
Sure.
So I went back and I let him know, and I was like, hey, like, I did what you told me. Like, what do you suggest? And he suggested I take more meds. And it was just at that time I realized that that's not what I wanted. Like, I walked out
Hmm.
of there with a prescription and immediately started looking for other options, and especially more holistic options and other ways that I can actually take care of my body and my mental health
Yes.
without having to add um, a bunch of chemicals that, like, after the research that I've done, like, it's disrupting my actual brain.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I that was around the same time that I partnered with a superfood company, and I was able to really get my nutrition in check and get my gut health specifically in check. Like, I just nothing that's nothing that I ever done before. I
Mm.
never actually was intentional about caring for my gut health. Um, then I realized, like, 2 weeks into my nutrition program, I felt happy again. I felt all my feelings again, and I felt energized. I wasn't sleeping all day. I like everything was just coming together. And
Yeah.
I started realizing, like, wow, so, like, what if I would have gotten my habits in check, or even because I also was reading books, so I gained more coping skills, um, that I could have been doing a lot better. So again, this is not me saying that, like, hey, if you're giving prescription meds, or like meds are bad, medication is bad, or
Right.
anything
Right.
like that, don't take it. That's not what I'm saying. But in my experience, that's not what I needed at the time. Um,
Sure.
I needed to get my habits in check, and I need to gain some knowledge on more coping skills.
Yeah.
And once I had that, I haven't, honestly, like, it's been over a year now. I haven't needed any depression meds. I haven't needed anything along those lines. I am currently looking for a psychotherapist, but I want to make sure that there's someone that's focused on fixing the issue. I don't think I have an issue now, but, like, making sure that if they do find something, they're going for the root of the issue, not just trying to, like, paint over it basically and cover it up.
Right. No, absolutely, man. And
Mhm.
again, I appreciate you sharing that. It's
Yep.
we don't want to just address the symptoms.
Mm,
Symptoms are important, right?
yeah.
Symptoms that help us direct and point to maybe something else that might be going on. For those of you that have never been in therapy,
Mm,
you might only know some of the experiences that you're having, like what Carlos was sharing. You might see, I am sleeping a lot, or I am feeling nervous a lot. Maybe you don't even know the word anxious. You're just like, I'm just nervous a lot, or I worry a lot, or I'm scared a lot. So you might not know the emotional language that we may use. So the fact that you acknowledge that is great. And to your point about the medication usage, I would say as a therapist, I'm very much in favor of utilizing it as a tool,
mm.
not as the end all be all. And I'm gonna try to make that point again,
Yes.
because again, this is not against people with medication.
Mm,
If you utilize medication, it's not a problem and it's not a bad thing.
mm,
However, you got to understand you have to use that in conjunction with therapy. So medication is a tool, and then we add therapy with that to address the root cause, which is exactly what Carlos was just speaking on. We put those together, we can actually see real progress. We can see real change, but it takes time to work through that. For some people, I will tell you, I believe we touched on this in our initial call. Some people, depending on what they present with, what their issues may be, they might not be very emotionally stable. They might be all over the place, very erratic behavior, we would say. I can't engage in therapy with you when you're all over doing this. I can't, because you're not mentally stable and grounded enough to actually receive what we're going
mm,
to share. And you're not going to be able to be very vulnerable, probably, in the way that we need to, in a productive way. You might, what we would say, emotionally vomit all over me and just like let it all out, but
mm,
that's not constructive. We got to do this step by step in a very delicate way. So sometimes the medication is a method or tool to get us to stability. And then we can start engaging in therapy to start unraveling and discovering why maybe you're anxious or depressed or fearful, or whatever those thoughts may be. So that's a way that it could work. And to further emphasize that point, unless you have a truly debilitating issue, right? Something that you will never be able to fully function the way that you want. Many people don't need to be medicated permanently. You might need it for a period of time to help you again get stability, do your work so that you can address those core issues that caused you to reach out to the psychiatrist to get medicated in the first place. And then you can slowly taper down over time. And if you don't know those things, those are definitely things to share with your provider to get that understanding. For most people, they don't have severe and persistent mental illness. We go through periods of time, like adjustments, if you will.
Seasons.
Yeah, seasons where you are dealing with something, but it's not forever.
Mhm.
Everybody gets depressed at times. Everybody will get anxious at times, but it's usually not a permanent thing. It's in response to something. I lost somebody that I really cared about. That's normal to feel depressed. That's normal to maybe be anxious. Things like that. So we want to definitely differentiate. So we're not saying it's everybody should be medicated for everything and forever, and we're also not saying that medication's evil. It's a tool and it serves a purpose and a function. But to Carlos's point, and I think it's very important that we acknowledge that if you only have a provider that only seems to wants to lean towards medication and
Mhm.
doesn't ask other important questions, which I'm definitely going to be talking about with you. What do you eat? How well do you sleep? Do you do any physical activity? Do you have social support?
Never.
Do you have people around you that you care about, that you can open up to, that you talk to about the things that you got going on? If all those things are in disarray, medication can't fix that.
Mm-mm.
So it's important to understand that. So, in speaking on that, I want to ask you, because I know you touched on a little bit about that's what a lot of your business has been about. That's sort of
Mhm.
that pivot that you made in the height of the pandemic, and realizing that working with autistic children in the clinic wasn't going to be the main way for you to provide for yourself. How did you end up finding the desire and the drive to want to build out a company and doing work within the nutritional sciences or within the dietary space?
Honestly, I got tired of people reaching out to me all the time and asking me, "How are you in shape? How are you healthy? How are you happy? How do you have energy all the time?"
Mm,
And me not knowing what to tell them, or people literally, when you're in psychology, a lot of people come up to you and kind of just blur out all the problems and stuff like that, and all
yeah.
I could really say at the time was like, "Oh, damn, that's crazy." And like I knew that I needed to do something so that I can give people a solution,
Yeah.
regardless of where they are. So moving into my business just made the most sense because I knew that there's millions of Latinos and people of color who need that support, who need that exposure,
Yeah.
and they're not getting it. I know because I looked for months and months and months, and I was like, okay, what actual options are we presented with? What actual information are we seeing every day? If you're going to social media on TikTok, like you, or I'm not even like I don't even spend a lot of time on TikTok. I do a lot of on Instagram. But if you scroll for a good half an hour, you'll get so many bad news. You'll get so many different points of view, and our community tend to think that whatever you see on there is the truth.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, as much as I don't like I don't really enjoy being on camera, recording myself doing all that stuff, I knew that it was important for me to represent and like really kind of just um, show people who look like me that yes, I do meditate, yes, I do yoga, yes, all this stuff is necessary, and most importantly, when they're because we're all like they're all going to continue to scroll, like it's not going anywhere. If they so it's not going anywhere, so I gotta have
Yeah.
to be real. I was like, if they see 20 posts and 19 of them are negative, I want to be that one post that actually is uplifting, that's actually like giving them solutions, that's
Yeah.
actually adding value to their life.
Yes.
So it just makes sense for me. And as soon as I started, I had so much support from even the field in applied behavior analysis. I had so much support from other like black and brown people who literally would tell me like, "Hey, I was feeling awful, and I saw your post, which took me 15 minutes to make." And like they were like, and he completely got me going, and I went and like did better on my job, or went and started meditation for the first time, and
Hmm.
that's what really pushed me to, hey, like w- even though like I'm not a presenter or whatever, like all that stuff, like I need to gain those skills so that I can actually add value to my community and help
Yeah.
our community heal because we need to, especially
Absolutely.
after the pandemic. Like it's there's no question. Like we have to. We all have to.
Facts.
Like, we
Facts. Big. That's big facts you speaking on, man. I cannot agree with you more, especially the representation side. And I love
Mhm,
what you said there. I want to go back to that about the
mhm,
social media aspect
mhm,
because, as I told you, I'm new to this space too. Like I'm not very fluid in being in front of the camera, I felt a similar desire that you did to
Mhm.
be more of service, not just to, of course, I want to, being real, I want to focus on my communities, which is the Black and Latino communities.
Mhm.
But a lot of the discussion and the conversations I have are largely around men and our issues, men's mental health. But it also does impact women because a lot of us want families, want to be married, want to be parents. And so it impacts a large breadth of the population, not just in the United States, but in the world. And so I recognize, like you did, that maybe there's more than I can do. So whatever discomfort I need to learn to get over, then I need to get over it
Yep.
because it's going to benefit more people. And
So now
so
it's not about us.
yeah, and I agree with you. Like, from what I've been told, because
Mhm.
I kind of predate social media, so I'm not as maybe fluid and utilizing it as often as other people do.
Yes.
I didn't understand the endless scrolling. Like that was
Mhm.
not like that was a very foreign concept to me because I'm just not like that.
Mhm.
I can't even get on there now and just start looking. But I have heard from other clients, particularly my younger ones that I used to have
Mhm.
when I was very early on in my career, who would say like they can't even get away from their phone. I remember this one particular young lady, believe she was 12. It was like when I was in my internship when I was still in grad school. I remember she said this and I was just like, what? She was like explaining that she would go to sleep at night and sometimes she would go to bed late. It might be like 1 a.m. But she said that she would always have her ringer on. And if she, for whatever reason, heard a tone or she saw even somehow when she was asleep, felt like she saw the flash of like a notification that she would wake up and she said, I had verbatim, I had to answer it. So that was a huge awakening for me
Mhm.
as somebody who did not grow up with all of these things. I'm like, wow, that seems really
It's a
concerning.
responsibility. Yeah.
That's really
It's like
concerning that you think that
yeah.
you should be disrupting your sleep pattern to go answer somebody. I don't care if they're answering you right now. Put your
Mm.
phone to do not disturb, flip it down, turn it off, whatever you got to do, but you need to take better care of yourself. So it just goes to show when you're talking about people scrolling, sometimes maybe the content that they're seeing, and you're right, in today's day and age, not that everything is horrible or there's all this bad news. It's just that we're so interconnected. You can be exposed to so much different types of information that we previously weren't. Reading the newspaper or even in the early days of Facebook, like you weren't seeing as much as you are today, where you can be flooded by on seemingly one platform, let alone if you utilize multiple,
Yeah.
you can just be drowning in it, so to speak. It's important to have something to counterbalance that. So I love what you said, that I want to be that one post that tries to give somebody hope or inspiration or encouragement to push through whatever they're dealing with. I feel similarly. I'm doing these conversations and having these discussions because I'm hoping we can benefit from it. And maybe it gives us a sense of enlightenment or excitement that this thing that I thought that I was stuck doing, this pattern
Mhm.
of behavior I think that I'm stuck having or being like, this way of thinking that I thought was my personality is not necessarily true, to be able to help all of us challenge those type of thoughts. So it's good to know that there's other brothers in the space who are also trying to do something similar.
100%, definitely, and again, like to even piggyback on that, like even give people a little bit of clarity because, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much information out there that it's hard to like slow down and figure out, hey, what's true? Hey, what actually works for me? What do I want? Like questions that seem really simple, but
Mm-hmm.
now I know, especially after working with hundreds of people, that that's not something that we're asking ourselves. It's not something that we're sitting down with a piece of paper and really writing down
Mm-hmm.
what is it that we want, what is it that we're looking for, and giving people that clarity and exposing them to that different verbiage, exposing them to a different way of looking at the word,
Oh yeah.
at the world.
Yeah.
I think it's really powerful because especially or like or young like black and brown males, they spend a lot of time listening to a lot of like rap and stuff that um, uses all like a way of speaking that is not conducive to helping them like be better.
Mm.
It's very destructive and it creates a lot of separation within our communities rather than actually reminding us that we're one, we're more alike than we're different.
Oh
um
yeah. Whew. That's
mhm,
that's a big one. And
mhm.
I've definitely had my fair share of it's funny you mentioned that. I haven't actually talked about that one on camera before, but
Gotcha.
I have a very interesting experience with like rap and hip hop. Like I like to
Mm,
consider myself a very eclectic type of person where I appreciate different music from various different backgrounds. But I will admit I'm very much a hip hop head.
yeah.
But but to your point though, I do recognize that for a lot of young people, especially, because it's when you're young, it's hard to be able to differentiate, like you said, between fact and fiction.
Hmm.
What's real and what's not? What's opinion, right? And what's expert,
Yes.
right? We got a lot of that going on right now. A lot of people, actually, let me make that point again.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opinion people, people who present their opinion as fact, that's
Mm, too much
overshadowing people who are
noise.
actually experts in their fields.
Yeah.
Like that's a real thing. And for young people, and I get it, because when you're young, you just don't know any better. It's
Hmm.
hard to learn to differentiate that unless somebody has actually taught you how to do that, right? But back to the music though. Even when you talk about hip hop, so and again, I'm pretty well versed in it. So I'll use a recent example of a body of work that I think is great because of what it provided to the community.
I love
Kendrick
it.
Lamar's last album,
Oh, yep.
right? That was real.
Vulnerability. He's
his
literally
his
just
his
shows.
vulnerability was spot on. You could tell the brother has been going to therapy. He just laid his soul out there, and I appreciate you, man, for everything that
Hmm.
he put out there. As compared to some of these other, like maybe younger hip hop artists, where I would say it's more of the facade that a lot of us are used to. It's like money, women, items, clothes,
Yeah, items.
chains, cars, whatever. It's a lifestyle, right? And I don't hate on the lifestyle. Like, do you? If that's really you and you really about it, do you? But for a lot of people, that's unrealistic. For a lot of people, what also comes with that can be destructive if you don't understand what's really being said, right? So if you're glorifying like drug dealing or abusing women or committing illegal acts to make money, I'm not gonna co-sign that because
Hmm.
that's not what we want. Now, there's a lot of I will say there's a lot of guys who talk about that's what they did. They don't do it no
Hmm.
more, right? I think that that's okay. Like we're allowed to grow and evolve. Sometimes we just broad brush people because they say, "Oh, you did something bad, so therefore you are bad forever." You know,
Hmm.
I'm especially being a therapist. I believe a bit more nuance to the for a strong degree. So I don't demonize all those artists who do that, but for
Hmm.
the ones, for example, who talk about gang life and again committing these illegal acts in the present when they don't have to, that to me doesn't make sense because now you're influencing young people to think that that's a great way to behave, right? Or getting catching charges, going to jail, even after you've made it. Like that just
Hmm.
doesn't make sense. It's not a good strategy. You wouldn't tell somebody go to school, go get a finance degree, go work on Wall Street, and then go kill somebody. Like that doesn't make sense. Like you made
Hmm.
it, you got it out of your environment, you're doing well for yourself. Why would you go back and compromise everything that you worked hard for? Literally doesn't make sense. All hip hop artists don't do that, but some do.
Hmm.
And those, I would agree. I think that kind of stuff, we don't need to have a place for that because it doesn't help us grow and evolve as a people. I don't know if you want to add
No,
anything
I
to
agree.
what I'm
I
saying.
myself, like very much like you. I love many kinds of music. I'm bilingual, so I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. But I would say that rap and hip hop are what some of my favorite genres.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up listening, like especially when I was in college, to a lot of like really hardcore rap, all of this, um, all of this stuff that you think that that's how they live, that's how life really is. But
Mm-hmm.
even if you look at like Future, even 21 Savage and stuff like that, they like, yeah, no, I don't like do drugs like that anymore. Like I they're married, they have kids, like they
Yeah.
many people don't understand that, like, hey, they're not saying that this is the life they live. They're just sharing with you a story about the stuff that they've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them I even have moved past that. That
Right.
doesn't mean that like they're still doing it, and especially doesn't mean that you should be doing it to get
Correct.
to where you want to be. That doesn't mean that that's like a rite of passage that like, hey, okay, so I gotta sell drugs, do this, do all that stuff to get to like their point of being financially stable, financially wealthy, having freedom of time and stuff like that. I can tell you that
Mm-hmm.
because now I have my own business and I didn't have to do all of that stuff. And it's important for us to get that clarity.
Oh yeah.
Especially even if you listen to the Kendrick Lamar album that he dropped, like if you don't understand that he's literally just speaking on his own story, not
Mm-hmm.
he's not telling you how to live life. You can have very different outcomes, and you could end
Absolutely.
up behaving in very different ways. Um,
Absolutely.
and it's important to remember what he says, that we um, that he's just sharing his story. He is just telling his truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And what worked for him doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for us. Like, it's important for us
Right.
to know that.
No, absolutely. And the reason why I brought his up is because
Mhm.
that's very much the essence of what I'm doing here. Well, what I do as a professional, but also what I'm doing with these conversations is being able to be open and honest and be real about what we go through. Even going back to what you said earlier about social media, not the highlight reel. We're talking about the real. So that means the highs, the
Yeah.
lows, the middles, not the everything was successful and I made it
Mhm.
where I wanted to be. No, it was the moments where things weren't great and the moments where I experienced loss and I didn't know where I was going to pay for this bill and I had to figure it out, right? It's
Yes.
being able to acknowledge the journey, but also as we're sharing the success, acknowledging all steps in that process and in that journey, because for a lot of us that is what we will go through, right? Like
Yeah.
life does not go in a straight line.
I love
For
that
some
yeah,
of it's very jagged.
I love that you bring that up, because that's why I don't have an issue being vulnerable now. But for a while, there was a lot of shame in my I had a lot of shame in my own journey. Um, Especially like before me knowing that I was from the hood, there was no shame. But once I actually started like hanging out with people who didn't have the struggles that I had, I started realizing like, oh, like, oh, this is not like I started telling myself, at least, like, this is not normal. Like,
Yeah.
there was a lot of suffering and stuff like that, and there was a lot of shame in my own story, and then a lot of shame of where I come from, and the things that I've gone through to get to where I am today.
Hmm.
I felt like I had this mask, basically, where I would just tell a story but not really be open enough to tell my true story. And now I embrace my journey, because I think that's where true healing happens.
Yeah.
Um, and it's important and it's important for us Latino men and Black men. And we're both. So
Oh yeah.
it's important. It's important for us to like speak to people and tell people about or truth. And this is something that I also learned as I worked on my healing. um, Make sure that you like if you're not comfortable yet with sharing your story and sharing your journey. I'm not saying to do what we're doing and just go on social media and share with everybody, because there's people that
Hmm.
are not going to understand where you're coming from. It's
Right.
important for you to find people that are going to support you and listen to you without judgment,
Yes.
because I personally been hurt a lot when I shared my story with people that didn't understand, and added like labels and did all this stuff, and it hurt for a while. But now I
Hmm.
know, yes, it's important for you to share. And if you don't have anyone in your life, you don't have a friend or a family, that's a perfect time for you to go to therapy. Like, that's the perfect time so you can find someone who will listen to you without judgment and be completely objective and keep it real with you.
Hmm.
And that's really important. And just to go back a little bit on what we talked about, therapy as well, it's important for us to know that, like, right now I'm happy, I feel free, I feel amazing, I have an amazing support system, and I'm still looking for a therapist. Like this, you don't go to therapy when you're down. Don't wait till you're down to go to therapy.
Very
That's
true.
something that's like very common in our communities. That, like, hey, okay, um, like, I'm gonna wait till I'm feeling better now. I'm gonna no. If you're feeling better, then that's a perfect time for you to go,
Absolutely.
and really, basically, on bots, literally all of that stuff. Like, clear out that closet and like really go in there deep with someone that's gonna support you and not judge you. It's powerful and it's necessary. And in our community, many other times when you do try to talk to someone, they immediately go to judging you, even calling you names, or doing things that are not gonna help you do that again. Because if you're
Yeah.
punished when you open up, then behaviorally, as someone who has a degree in behavior, if you're punished, that's going to decrease the likelihood that you're going to do that again, that you're going to
Correct.
be open again. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man. So many facts you just said. So many facts you just said. I got to hit on the last part because I
Good.
pretty much
Yes.
always make this point because you just made it. So I gotta echo it, especially for men, right?
Hmm.
Men, young men. I make the case, and is my belief that it starts when we're very, very small. That we are systematically conditioned as young people,
Hmm.
as young males, from when we're very young to not be expressive, to not be vulnerable, because there's all these expressions that we know that people say to us when we try to be.
Mm.
They say, don't be a girl, don't be a woman, stop being so emotional, stop
Don't be
crying,
weak.
suck it
Hmm.
up, don't be
Hmm.
weak, right? There's all, and there's more.
Mm.
Those are the first ones that come to mind.
Yeah.
There's so many of those expressions we hear, right? And I really want to make this point. Like, you brought it up, and it always touches something in me every time I have to talk about this because it's so hard. It's so hard. Even me, I've had to go through so much therapy myself because of what you're talking about.
Hmm.
To give the example, I grew up in a household with primarily my mother, my father, and my sister. Then my mother passed away from cancer when I was very young, when I was 7. So then it was just me, my older sister, and my dad. He was a very traditional man. He did not come from an environment where his family was very expressive with him. He also had several siblings in the same household, so I'm sure it was hard just to get attention. But regardless, he did not create a space for me and my older sister to be open and honest. And anytime I did, he told me to suck it up and very much belittled and minimized me all the time. So that's a huge reason why it was so hard for me for so long to be real. I would try to be a really good student so
Hmm.
people wouldn't look deeper underneath the surface because I didn't
Same.
want to draw attention because my father was always like, you keep that stuff to yourself. You don't tell anybody, right? It's all these messages that we hear throughout our lifetime. And then I have to hear young men tell me some of the same things that I
Hmm.
heard, and I'm way older than them. And it hurts.
Every
It
time.
really hurts to see them struggle in that way because I don't want to see more young men hurt the way that I do and
Hmm.
have because it's so much harder. It impacts so many relationships that you have. I'll give another example because I talk about this as well. I'm a father. So parenting my young son, it could be more challenging. Thankfully, because of the work I do, I'm forced to really challenge myself all the time. It would be very difficult to make sure that I'm creating this space for him to be vulnerable, not just with me, but with everybody, to not minimize him just because it was done to me. Make sure I don't pass that on. I don't pass that generational trauma onto him where he's now going to struggle with every
Break
relationship that
break
he
that
has moving
cycle.
forward. Correct. So I
Hmm.
have to I have to be better. We have to be better so the next generation doesn't have to suffer. But to bring all that back to the point of what we were talking about, it's hard because it's not just one person you have to fix or change their perspective. It's really a society. And when I say society, I don't even mean just the United States. I mean
Hmm.
globally. Globally, this is how a lot of us as men are raised. And our fathers don't give us the space or create the space, I would say, for us to be vulnerable. Usually those are like relationships you expect to have with your mother, and with your father is just tough, pat you on the back, you
Hmm.
know, caveman type stuff. And I think we can be so much more. And I challenge all of us, in all
Hmm.
seriousness, I challenge all of us to do the work necessary so that we can be better for the next generation so they don't have to deal with a lot of the challenges that we have to.
And I want to piggyback on what you're saying. I'm doing the work because um, what many of us don't even know what doing the work looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know anything about psychology, if you've never been to therapy, if you don't, or if you don't have supportive family, feel your feelings.
Yep.
Feel your feelings. A lot of people in our communities tend to hide their feelings, bottle them up, literally whether it's alcohol, smoking, whether it's watching. Like now, like people don't understand that they're doing that just through binging Netflix for days on end because they're not allowing themselves to sit with their thoughts
Mm-hmm.
and really dive deep into them and like really feel your feelings. And I
Yeah.
and I and I emphasize the fact of feeling your feelings because it's gonna suck. Like it's when you
Yes, it
first
does.
start doing the work, like there's gonna be tears. It hurts again because you're experiencing, like in your mind, you're experiencing that situation again.
Hmm.
But until you are able to like work on detaching yourself from that and understanding that that's not who you are, that's not your identity, you're not going to be able to heal properly. You're not going to be able to actually get through the through those hard times.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that you bring that to the next person that you interact with. You bring that
Yes.
to you bring that to your family, your friends, your relationships, and that can cause a lot of pain in our communities, in our families.
Hmm.
So I love that you use the word challenge because it is a challenge. But
Yeah.
I also challenge you to go ahead, do the work, feel your feelings because nobody else is gonna feel them for you.
Absolutely.
That literally,
No, no, you're spot on. And I would
mhm,
say one way that you could do that if you don't
mhm,
have access to a therapist, because this is
mhm.
something that I did like way, way back when, even though I value it much more now, but I didn't really appreciate it as much at the time, is journal.
Yeah.
And when I say journal, you can do it in the traditional sense of I do it in a notebook. You
Mhm,
can do it, we have technology. So like I've done it where I'll do like I talk to my phone, let it record the text for me. You could, if you really want to, you're really cool. You can video record yourself, whatever,
mhm.
Snapchat, Instagram, whatever. You can do all these different ways to capture your thoughts and the memories at that time. And I think it's important to Carlos's point, because you want to be able to capture how you felt at that moment in time so that you are able to recall it. So let's
Mhm.
say you can't deal with it at that time, right? Because maybe it's inconvenient, maybe, there's family around, whatever. But if I capture it, I can go back at a later time where I feel a little more comfortable. I create this space where I can be vulnerable. Now I'm going to go through, I'm going to replay that, or I'm going to reread what I
Mhm.
said. And now I'm going to sit with it. Maybe I even meditate on it if I really want to go deep,
Yeah.
but I'm
I
gonna I'm gonna sit on it because I need to understand why I felt hurt, why I felt sad, why um, this person isn't communicating with me, whatever the issues may be. That's something that you can do even when you don't have anybody else around. We do have a way to record this information because number one, it helps you externalize how you're feeling, so it's not just going on in your own mind anymore. But then you
mhm.
can go back to it maybe when you're in a calmer place and go through and actually process them, and because that will be vital for any type of relationship you want to have in the future.
I think it's awesome that you brought up journaling because I myself like I would spend hundreds of dollars on shoes. I would do trips and everything like that, and like I bought myself like super fancy $20 journal on Amazon. So I was like, I'm gonna invest in myself. This was one of the first investments that I made on myself. But
Yeah.
something that I learned through journaling as well is that when you write it down, then you're able to like detach yourself from it. Understand
Hmm.
that that's not who you are. That's something that you've been through.
Right.
That's something that you felt, but that's not who you are. You are love. You are expansion. You are way more than just those feelings that are just honestly reactions to the of your brain to the environment.
Hmm.
Most of the time,
Yeah.
that's really not who you are. Um, yes, and I know I get it. It's a physical. Emotions are very physical. Like you feel them in your body.
Oh
So
yes.
it's hard for you to be like, wow, how is that not me? I feel this way, but that's not you. You are the servant part of your brain, that the one that can observe those feelings. That's you, and you don't have to act on them. You can just observe them and let them be. And that's
Yes.
the beauty of writing them down because you can observe it, be like, oh, that's what I'm thinking, and like you can make, and then from there you can pivot and make a change. Um,
Absolutely. No, that's so important, and I like the way you put that together too.
mm,
When I say externalizing, that is exactly what I mean. It helps you
right.
separate them from yourself, so that usually we call it rumination when you are feeling something. Like let's say you're sad. Like we'll use a common example.
I'm a master
Y-
at
y-
that.
Yeah, you break up with somebody, or somebody broke up with you, right?
Hmm.
And you're sad about it. So
Hmm.
it's natural that the thoughts are going to be very proliferating in your mind, where they're going on repeat and loop all the time, right? So how do I help with that? Well, externalizing them helps me detach them through journaling, through a process like journaling.
Hmm.
So it's not like I'm not capturing them. I'm capturing how I felt. I felt really bad on this day because I missed this person,
Yep.
right? You can make it something simple like that.
Mhm.
So I have that there. So when I'm ready, I can also come back to that. I can not only see it and then process it in that time. This is how I'm feeling. What would I want to be different moving forward? Another way to benefit from that is now that I'm not thinking about it all the time, I can also, as more time progresses and I keep doing that process, these are kind of like little timestamps, if you will, where I can see moments of growth. Man, I remember about 3 weeks ago, I didn't even want to get out of the bed. Look at my journal. Look what I said. And now it's been like a couple months. I'm starting to feel a little bit better. Still not great, but I feel a little bit better than I did before. Then you could take it a step further. If you get a therapist, it is a very great tool for us to use because the best way for me to understand how you feel is for you to express it. I can't read your mind. I don't know what you're thinking. But when you have you so on July 25th, this and this happened and this is how it made me feel, right? Okay. Now we can actually go through and start to digest what it might really mean. Then we can actually start to connect dots that you may not be able to see, but that I might be able to see because of the information that you provide.
Mhm.
So it's a great, great tool to really capture what you're experiencing. So again, if you can't find a therapist for whatever
Mhm.
particular reason at that time, that's okay. You could utilize a tool like journaling in the meantime to at least capture those thoughts and help you to separate how you're feeling. I think that's a great way just to get started. And then, of course, another little tidbit back to what Carlos was doing is try to maybe consider surrounding yourself with more positive and uplifting content. So if you have somebody like Carlos who's posting something that gives you a little inspiration for the day, maybe I need to focus on trying to consume that type of information as opposed to things that make me feel inadequate or
Mhm.
invalid or minimized or less than or whatever other negative feeling might come up for you. I think that can be helpful ways because we have so much of this social media platforms available, that might be sort of like a starter way
Mhm.
to get support until you can get some real people there to actually, engage with.
Definitely, and I think again to like piggyback on what you're saying, it something that it's important to realize, and this is a quote that I live by. Super simple, 3 words: progress or perfection.
Hmm.
Remember that, like RJ said, like regardless of where you are, um, there's gonna be times that you're like, okay, I'm not where I want to be, but you can look back and you're like, okay, but I made progress.
Hmm.
And once we made that our goal, right? I think making perfection our goal, then you can actually continue that on that path and
Yeah.
not get discouraged. Because there's gonna be times that you're like, I'm still dealing with this stuff, and then you might even have those thoughts within yourself that are gonna
Hmm.
just literally disrupt your whole healing process, and that's not what we want.
No,
We
no.
want to. That's not what we want at all. Especially with social media, like Andre is saying, like there's so much comparison that you're like, look at them, they're doing this and doing that, and that's really not helping you get to where you want to be.
Mm-mm.
Um, so like, I personally, what I did, you don't have to do this because it does take some time. But I went through the people that I was following, and I just started unfollowing people that weren't serving me, not as a way to not out of hate or out of like any out of love for myself, out
Hmm.
of love for my own attention and my time, which is the most valuable asset that we have.
Yes.
So I literally went through all 1,000 people that I were following, and I unfollowed like 200 people that I felt weren't really helping me um, be my full self.
There you
Um,
go.
but yeah,
Absolutely. No,
mhm.
and even
Goals.
to add to that last point, I think thinking about where you give your attention to. That's what I meant about what you
Mhm.
consume. Because I
Yes.
have clients that struggle in that area. They
Mhm.
are very caring, loving people who want to really benefit a lot of people of society. But because they consume so much information that's happening in the world, it can be overwhelming to the point that it may make you cynical, apathetic, maybe a nihilist, where you just think like nothing really matters anymore. Everything sucks. Why even bother trying?
Like a try.
And I make the point, I try to make the point
I'm
that
ready.
especially as black and brown people, we cannot afford that attitude. Like we just can't because we've already had so much to overcome and so much to deal with, and there's still much more work to be done. That it doesn't diminish to say that these things are not really happening. We're not living in some fairy tale like, oh yeah, bad things don't happen. They do.
Mhm.
But the question is, how much of that maybe can I be exposed to before I recognize that I'm getting to the point of being overwhelmed and I need to pause there and make sure that I'm good? Because I still want to be of service. I still want to be of value. I still want to add to other people, pour into other people, so to speak.
Mhm.
In order to do that, I have to be extremely mindful of how much information I'm consuming online and what type of information am I consuming. Because if a lot of it turns out to be negative, don't be surprised your attitude towards life is negative. Like it's very simple, but
You reap what you saw.
right, exactly. If you see all this information around you, you can't be shocked that you're like, man,
Mhm.
a lot of things I'm quoting are negative, and a lot of the things I'm pointing out are hard things that are happening in the world. At no point do we say those things aren't mattered, they don't matter, and we should do nothing. Absolutely not. But what I also got to understand is I have a finite amount of emotional capacity that I can afford. Usually, I would say every day. Sometimes we do a teacup metaphor because you only have so much that you can tolerate, and it's going to build up. Your cup's going to fill up, and once it's full, it's full. And if you keep trying to pour more in there, now you're getting to the point of being overwhelmed because you're taking more than what you have the ability to truly process and deal with. So then, if that happens over a period of time, it's going to be very difficult for you to then want to get out of the bed, to be motivated to do anything that you used to do that brought you joy or happiness.
Mhm.
And that can put you on a dark path, that we don't want to see people go to. So I think it's very important to acknowledge and understand the way that these different platforms that we use, the different media that we consume, how it can play on our minds and on our hearts, and recognize, hey, if I'm doing a lot of that, if I'm consuming a lot of that, and it's tending to make my view of the world, it seems like it's kind of dark right now. Maybe I need to consider, as you pointed out, Carlos, maybe I need to unfollow some people. Maybe I need to not look at so many of these articles or consume this many videos talking about these issues that just make me feel really, really down. You know what I mean?
100%. But it's all about being more intentional with our time and our attention.
Hmm.
There's all these corporations who are spending billions of dollars to get your time and attention.
Yep.
So it's important for us to be intentional about what we're allowing into our teacup. What are we
Yes.
allowing into our day? It's really necessary. It's also important to remember that we're living in a completely different time now. That 100 years ago was not a thing. 50 years ago
Mm,
wasn't a thing. In a day now, we can be exposed to more negativity and pain and suffering and hurt than someone 50, 100 years ago would be exposed in their entire lives.
right.
Um, because especially if you're an empath and you love people like we do, it's hard for you to detach yourself from all that suffering.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh, absolutely.
it's necessary for us to be intentional and remember, like, hey, you only have a certain amount of time and energy in your day. um Again, we're not saying to like avoid everything that's bad, like or everything that's like bad news. Like, definitely, if you feel like you need to be aware of stuff that's happening in the world,
Right.
do it, but be intentional with it. Like, even dedicate time for it, and like make sure that it's not your entire day. 'Cause
Correct.
social media can 100% make that happen without you trying. Like, you don't
Oh
have to
yeah.
try. You don't have to
No,
try.
no, you're absolutely right. You're just kind of going and going and going. You don't even recognize, you haven't even disconnected yet.
Mhm.
You're on the whole time. And I've had to have some clients where we've had to have those discussions, and I'm saying, we need to limit your time because
Mhm.
I don't know how much of it you're spending so far, but it seems like it's too much. Because if this is your sort of attitude,
Mhm.
especially if I know based on what you told me you are a very caring person, that's not a good sign. That means
Mhm.
like you've been so overwhelmed that your whole perspective on life is changing. That's not a good sign for somebody who wants to create so much positive change and impact for the
Definitely.
world.
And,
So,
and there's this quote that really helped me, because I myself am very much a giver. I'm very much someone who tends to um, give. I used to give too much of myself, for lack of better words. But there's this quote that really helped me. I don't. I'm pretty sure it's not her quote, but Oprah spoke on this.
mm,
And it basically, it talks about like us being a cup, right?
mm,
Um, and the importance of us not literally just pouring our cup on everybody, because that's kind of how what I felt when I was like working at the clinic. I was like, okay, here's a little bit for the kids, there's a little bit for the parents, there's a little bit for my clients, there's a little bit for my partner. Like it was a little bit of, I was giving so much that I had like I was an empty cup. But the problem with that is that when your cup is empty, you start feeling like people are taking away from you. You start
Hmm.
feeling like you start feeling resentment to a lot of the people that you love because you feel like they're taking away from you.
Hmm.
What Oprah suggests is to fill your cup to the point that is overflowing, so that when you give, or even people take without you giving, you don't even notice it. Like you're like, oh, all right,
Mm.
cool. And honestly, when I made that switch, like it really helped me not like be a little bit, not necessarily selfish, but care, love myself a little bit more and make sure that I fill my cup first before I do anything else. Um,
Agreed. No, I like that. I was gonna add, the only thing I would add to that,
yes.
because I love the example. The way I would describe it would be, so you have your own cup, and then
Mm-hmm.
everybody else has one too. Anybody else that you
Mm-hmm.
care about, or any cause or issue, right? Your emotional capacity is a separate cup. So you pour into your cup first. Then you can go into other people, and you can whatever, or issues. Then you can pour into those areas. The point is, you took care of self first
Mm-hmm.
before you do anything else. And I always try to make that point, because that's what helps you to fight that feeling where nothing matters, you don't care about anything, and or you feel sort of dispassionate and feel like people are going to take advantage of you all the time. If I'm taking care of myself, it helps me sort of insulate things. It's where I'm less likely to be taken advantage of, because I'm very aware of the things that I need to address, and I'm making sure I'm doing them, which is why I poured into my cup first.
Nope.
But if I'm pouring into everybody else, as Carlos said, then nobody's left to help take care of me, and I have nothing left in my cup to pour back into myself. That is an unsustainable model. That's a great way to do this, where you start off here and you just
Mm-hmm.
go down, and
That's how
it's
that's
gonna
how
stay down.
I got burnt out. By the way, that's how I got
Correct.
burnt out.
That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly why we talk about burnout, because that
Mm-hmm.
exists in every profession too.
Yep.
If you care about people and you care about helping others, none of that is bad. None of that is bad. But
Amazing.
if you don't make sure, and I will say this last little soapbox point, if you don't make sure that you're your first priority always, you should expect over time that you're going to have that sort of inverted line of where I don't take good care of myself. I'm just going down this line, because that means I'm so used to giving to everyone else first. And maybe that's because it makes me feel the joy to be supportive, right? I enjoy that as well. I love being of service.
Mm-hmm.
But I also understand I have to also be an example. I cannot do that if I'm constantly giving to you and you and you and everybody else, and there's nobody left to look out for me. So we always have to look out for us first.
This conversation is on fire. By the way, I I I can see how powerful this is. Because even for myself, if I were to listen to this a couple of years ago, um, conversations like this, where you can hear other people of color, other males of color, actually being vulnerable and
Hmm.
doing it in a space that's non-judgmental, in a space that's
Yeah.
focused on growth and love. Um, it's powerful. It's powerful, and this is why I was so excited to this call with you, because I knew that um, just by having these conversations and like really sitting down with each other and basically being there for each other, like
Yeah.
dropping game, like giving game to each other, like that's what it's all about.
Oh yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Absolutely,
Like,
man. No,
mm,
I don't think there's any purpose, to me. There's no purpose in achieving accolades, wisdom, experience, technical skills, knowledge, if you don't share it. Like, there's no point. Like, it's cool if you have it. I mean, I
mm,
guess,
yeah.
if you really want to be selfish in the negative connotation. By the way, when I said selfish, I was saying in a positive connotation. That means you give to self first.
Mm-hmm,
That's not a bad thing to do.
mm-hmm,
But if I only care about myself, I would call that more of an egocentric point of view. I only care about me and the way things affect me. I don't support that. I think to me, the point is you gather all that, right?
Mhm.
Especially if you're talking to us, who we don't have a lot of professionals in these fields, or we don't have a lot of representation in these other different career paths because we don't even see them. So we don't even imagine that we could do them. It's
Mhm.
so important for us to give that freely. So you may not be able to access a mentor very quickly. You may not have people in your family that went to college. I was first time in college for my family. You
Same.
might you might have these experiences and recognize, you know what? I should share this because somebody might benefit from this. They might say, "Hey, I didn't know if I could start my own business focusing on health and wellness, or focusing on diet and nutrition, or personal training, or coaching, or being a therapist, or whatever other fields you may come from." I think it's important for us to expose ourselves to that information. So those of us that have a lot of this experience and this knowledge, we should feel some sort of duty to share it, to give the game to the young ones who are coming up so that they can understand that there's more that's possible than what they see in their immediate environment. That's
One hundred
that's
percent.
just how I feel. So
100%.
it comes up for me a lot. I
No, I
I,
love it.
I
No,
very
same.
much
I'm glad you said it. That's why I didn't even add anything. I'm like, yep, exactly what you said. Yep, 100%. I'm like, yep, I couldn't phrase it better myself. That's exactly facts.
thank
That's
you.
exactly
Thank you.
facts. Hmm.
All right. So, and speaking, man, we've touched on a lot of things so far,
Hmm.
and of course, I appreciate the way the conversation is going.
Sure.
I'm going to get a little bit more into the weeds, so to speak, on relationships, because I try to talk about that a little bit more for those of us, as much as we're comfortable with sharing in a public space, and how our experiences we may have had so far in life may have impacted the way we have operated in our romantic relationships or relationships with others, and how we might see it impacting us moving forward, what work that we might need to do to impact that. So I wanted to ask you, do you think in your experience, have you had to go through any particular challenges in your personal life and dating that have impacted the way you see things now, and maybe any work that you think you need to do moving forward?
Definitely. I would. The first word that comes to mind is responsibility. Um, and to be more specific about on that, responsibility about our actions and our words and like how we approach different things.
Mm,
And by that, I mean I am a I am now a really strong believer that um, you are responsible for the person that's listening to you to understand what you're saying. If you're communicating with someone and they don't understand what you're saying, that's not their fault. It's your responsibility to make sure that you speak to them in a way that actually that they can take in, they can understand. Um, and that doesn't mean like you keep like driving the same point over and over again. Change the
right.
way you say things, or even if you feel like a conversation is not going in a positive way, step away for a little bit. Um, like figure out a different way to say it, and then come back and have a more productive conversation.
Beautiful.
Because when you're upset, when you're angry, if you're yelling, you're not communicating. There's you're saying things and the other person's saying things back,
Right.
but you're not listening to each other. Um, I was blessed enough to be in a relationship for about 4 years. Actually, we ended a few months ago, but um, one of the beautiful things that I learned in that relationship is that I had this idea that couples fight, couples argue, couples yell at each other. But when we first came into a relationship, one of the things that we spoke about is that we will never do that, and luckily we never did in the entire time that we were together.
Beautiful.
Whenever we felt that someone's being frustrated, someone's getting agitated, okay, let's take a step back, let's do a little bit of breathing, and then we'll come back to this on another time.
Hmm.
And I feel like that was very, very helpful. But I also know that I personally witnessed many relationships, especially in the Black and Brown community, where it's standard for you to like fight and argue.
Yeah.
Um, but when you feel again back to a responsibility that you're getting agitated, that your point is not being understood, take a step back and figure out a different way to say it, even, or take a step back, go meditate, do some breath work, whatever you need to do to get yourself back to baseline and to calm. uh,
Hmm.
Go do that. But that's definitely something that I've learned, and I've had the pleasure to like experience myself, to know that it is possible, to know that you can do it,
Yes.
and that and that we need to do it as a community, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for putting that out there. And I want to echo everything you just said.
Mm,
To me, communication is the primary issue I usually see when it comes to relationships of any kind, not just romantic, like parent to child, friends, and romantic. It usually comes down to communication, not being understood, feeling like you're not being heard. And I love what you said. I would describe that under the umbrella of a pause skill. It's
yes.
understanding your limits, right?
Mhm,
Understanding that when I'm getting upset, I should probably not continue to keep engaging because I understand that I'm getting to my breaking point. And if I keep going, I might start saying things I don't mean, behaving in ways that I have to later go back and apologize for.
mhm.
And it's better to just avoid all that and say, you know what?
You can't take it back.
Right. Let me just take a moment, collect myself. Maybe it's maybe it's a few minutes, maybe it's an hour, doing something that's going to help me to decompress for a period of time, realize that this person is not understanding where I'm coming from. And I, like you said, I need to find another way to engage with them and be thoughtful because
Mhm,
I agree so much. The worst thing we can do in any relationship type is to withhold information.
mhm,
You want to be honest about how you're feeling. We want to create these spaces where we can speak freely to each other, but it's also important that we as each individual, like you mentioned, feel the level of, I would say, duty and responsibility to each other to be transparent about whatever it is that we got going on. That to me is how we help prevent issues from occurring or from them getting out of hand in a way
mhm,
that they don't have to. We don't have to yell, we don't got to scream, nobody got their hands, nothing like
mhm.
that. None of those things have to be normalized, none of them. But it requires a certain level of intentionality. I have to be able to say, you know what? And again, this is, I'll use myself. Like if I was talking to my son or talking
Mhm,
to a partner or talking to my sibling, I care about you enough that I don't want to say things that I don't mean. I'm getting
mhm,
quite upset right now. Let me take a moment because I don't want things to get out of hand. That to me would be the responsible way to approach it. Because at the end of the day, when we have relationships with people, right? I would like to be able to say, I think this is fairly universal, that we want to be understood by them.
mhm.
Would you agree with that statement, Carlos?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
So if I know I want to be understood, then that means I need to really take my time and be thoughtful about how I choose to express myself. Because my intention is not to hurt you, it's not to deceive you, lie to you, be insulting, anything like that. It's just because I want you to understand how I see things and how I feel. And I want to make sure that I'm doing the same to create the environment that you want to do the same with me.
Mhm,
That would be healthy communication. It doesn't mean it's always that smooth. It's not going to be exactly the way I said it. I'm talking about the essence, the overarching theme. If we're going to communicate, that would be the way I would hope that we would all want to do it. Because if we're all being understood, there's really no reason to argue.
mhm.
There's really no reason to fight because I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from. Let's figure out how we can find compromise and collaborate so that we can continue to move forward, right? I
100%.
I think that that's important, and that to me is the crux of what I see in a lot of the work I've done with clients and in my personal life, that I've had to
Mhm,
recognize that I need somebody who is always going to be willing to give me that in return because that's what I'm going to bring. And
mhm.
that's what we all need as the foundation, as you talked about, to
Yep.
have those types of relationships moving forward where it's not hostile, it's not tense. And then going back to why Carlos and I are here, to help men be more comfortable with being vulnerable,
Yep.
right?
So we're here. And I want to piggyback on something that you said, because I think it's important to highlight because it's easy to miss. But
Mhm.
intention is everything. Before, like, whenever you go into, if you're having a hard conversation, or you're going into to talk to someone that you care about,
Mhm.
ask yourself, what's my intention for having this conversation, because that's going to give you clarity as to what the outcome, and also give you flexibility as to
Yeah.
like what the outcome could be. Start with that intention. It's really important to realize, like, and ask yourself, like, why am I having this conversation?
Hmm.
If your intention is to make sure that say that to know that you're right, you should probably take a step back. Like, if you're and that's really important. Like, intention really can dictate how a conversation flows, and how much you actually can open up and be your true self, and how vulnerable you can be.
Oh
um,
yeah.
and
No.
you can even say it out loud. Honestly, I would go into conversation and let people know, so this is my intention for this conversation. I think it's
Yeah.
important that way everyone understands why we're doing this. um,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Absolutely. You're setting the tone essentially, right? So people know. Like if I usually give the example, like, most men don't want to hear the expression "we need to talk." Right. I mean, it
Yeah,
can go both ways too. Women may not want
yeah,
to hear that either because it has that sort of implicit understanding that this is going to probably be an uncomfortable conversation,
yeah.
right? But we don't often take the time and say, you know what? So today's the first, right? So on August 1st, on Monday, I'm going to set some time to the side. We're going to have a conversation about being understood, because I feel like some of the conversations we've been having recently, it doesn't seem like you're really grasping what I'm saying, and it seems like I'm not grasping what you're saying. So I want us to set aside some time and make sure we're really getting on the same page. Let's figure out where the disconnect is. That'll work for you? Okay, cool. And then we're being intentional with that time. So that way we both know, hey, maybe I'm going to come prepared with some notes. So I'm going to say, well, this is where I feel like I was misunderstood. And then maybe this is where I felt like I misunderstood you, and vice versa.
Hmm.
Productive dialogue. Like we're setting our intentions, and it's easier to follow along because you're not, a lot of times I've seen that people feel blindsided, and it's not a fun feeling to feel like you're sort of being caught off guard with some conversations, some topics, maybe some past experiences that you may have thought weren't issues, and then they just kind of come up. Maybe it's multiple in a row. Maybe you get like hit with a list of items, and you're not prepared to discuss them because you didn't know that they were a problem. And I think that it's important to, again, setting the intention, let each other know, hey, we're going to have this time set to the side, and we're really going to be intentional about discussing, point by point, not all of them at once. Let's go
Hmm.
through this point, make sure we're on the same page, and then move to the next one, and then to the next one. I think it's important to have that sort of systematic way of dealing with each other in terms of communication. So that way we're ultimately resolving more issues than we're just pointing out and
Hmm.
then having to kind of kick the can down the road and deal with it at a later time.
Exactly. Honestly, like, by doing that, you just like literally piling up issue on top of issue, and then like you when you look out, like when you take a step back from the relationship, you start looking. It's like, oh, this is all issues. Like, it's all problems, and that's not what we want. That's not what we want. We
No.
want we want to make sure that our conversations are solution oriented and focus on making progress more than
Oh yeah.
anything else.
Absolutely. And sometimes, sometimes it is just to be heard. Sometimes you're having
Mhm.
conversations with no particular agenda in mind. You're just like, I just need to be able to vent and share. It's just totally fine. But when you're
Mhm.
talking about problem solving,
Yeah.
as we were talking about, yeah, you got to come in with some sort of a playbook of how you're going to try to manage each other in terms of being able to communicate effectively. I think that's very important. And, to your point about in romantic relationships, I think it can be particularly challenging. And I want to make this one point because I feel like this comes up a lot based on what I've seen and what I've lived through, is the idea that if we don't have a healthy type of communication where we exchange our thoughts freely and openly, that we leave each other to largely assume what the other person's
Mm.
thinking. And unfortunately, that can lead us to develop feelings about that person that may or may not actually be based on accurate information, which
Mhm.
then may lead to behaviors that we end up displaying and demonstrating that are, again, not based on accurate feelings, which was also not based on accurate information.
Mhm.
And so I'm a big advocate to make sure that we're being very clear with each other and as open and as honest as we can be as often as possible. So we're decreasing the likelihood as much as possible that we don't have to be trying to fill in the gaps with what we think this person is thinking, what we think this person is feeling, because it's really not fair. At no point in time in this discussion did I ever think I know what Carlos is about to say? I know this is how Carlos feels because he's black and brown like me, right? So he must be saying these things from this lens, from this perspective. No, that would be my implicit bias doing all that talking.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we got to be similar. So, I'm sure a lot of the stuff we've lived, blah, blah, blah. Carlos, RJ, it's the same thing. Just swap the name out. No, we're two different people. There's some shared lived experience, sure, but there's also a lot of variation. None of us are monoliths from these communities that we come from. But there is some common understanding that we can at times have. But regardless, we don't want to be assuming what each other thinks and feels because that is really unfair to the other
Mhm.
person. You want to listen to them, listen to them,
Yep.
take the time to sit across from them and ask them the questions with intention and allow them to thoughtfully respond. And then you thoughtfully respond. Don't just jump and say, man, while Carlos is talking, man, I got about 5 things I'm ready to hit him with. That's not listening.
Mm-mm.
That's just waiting to respond. And I'm doing it in a very reactionary type of way. Notice I said respond. I didn't say
Mm-hmm.
react. If I'm reacting, I'm not even really digesting what Carlos said. I'm just gonna hit him with it. Boom, I'm gonna hit him with it. Instead of what did this man just say to me? Maybe if I took the time to really digest that and really understand where the man's coming from, we can find points to connect on, to understand, to compromise on. And so I've been trying to make it a very, very big point of this platform and both in my personal and professional life to really advocate that we take much more time to listen and understand each other and stop trying to assume for whatever reason when we maybe don't create the space to connect with each other or
Mm-hmm.
we're unwilling to, and then we end up filling in the gaps with our own thoughts and feelings.
100%. Definitely. Speaking facts. Again, just speaking facts. And honestly, to add to that, like, especially because we're in psychology field, like, from a brain physiology perspective, when you're allowing yourself to react, you're using like your old brain. You're using like the part of the brain that's not logical, basically. When you allow yourself to have those 5 seconds, 10 minutes, whatever time you need, and you actually use the prefrontal cortex, the actual part that allows you to be logical, that you can actually have a more productive conversation with that person and actually take a step
Hmm.
back to understand where they're coming
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
from.
why we sometimes we need that time,
Mm-hmm.
to collect ourselves so we don't get so emotionally charged and get
Mm-hmm.
upset. But a lot of it, again, from what I've seen, a lot of it is based on assumptions of what each other is saying. And sometimes you can tell, like you can look at a person and tell they're not really listening to what you're saying because maybe they're being very animated in their facial expressions or they're doing a lot of head movements and all
Mm-hmm.
this, looking like they're just not they haven't really listened to what you said. They heard the words, but then they put their bias put a meaning behind what you said instead of what did you mean when you said this. And I think that gets a lot of us uh, in a situation where we probably are arguing and fighting when we really didn't have to,
No need.
but
100%.
I will make this other last quick point on that subject is we got to always have this room, I say, to consider, not say that it's factual necessarily all
Mm-hmm.
the time, but consider
Be
that
open.
be open minded, that we could be wrong.
Yeah.
That I know I heard this, I know you said that, I know you behave this way, and that's how it appears to me. Again, bias. Hello, we all have
Mm-hmm.
bias. It appears to me that way. But what if I'm wrong?
Mm-hmm.
What if Carlos didn't actually mean that when he said it that way? What if when Carlos behaved that way and the way I interpreted it, that wasn't his intention?
What
What if I was to just ask him, is this what you meant when you
if?
said that? Is this what you meant when you
Mm-hmm.
did that? Is that what you meant? Because
Mm-hmm.
if it was wrong, it was like, you know what? And you're like, hey, no, 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 no. I don't know where you got that from, but that was not my intention. Oh, great. You know what I just did? I just saved myself from the negative feelings that I was probably going to have towards you and the behavior I was going to be. Maybe I was going to start being distant. Maybe I was going to
Mm-hmm.
start being cold. Maybe I was going to
Snapping. Yep.
start being, yeah, be much more judgmental, less patient. all these things. I just avoided it all.
Hmm.
So
And this openness also allows you to like this question that I like to live my life by. Would you rather be right? Would you rather be happy?
facts, facts, especially in you're talking about a romantic relationship or even in parenting, I would
Hmm.
say. Again, when I say assumptions, I mean across the board.
Yes.
Um, you're not always going to be right. And if you consider that fact, then you would challenge the way that things appear to you. And again, I'm saying it like I'm still held to the same standard. I have a
Hmm.
bias just like everybody else does. When I see things, I think majority of the time it is the way it appears to me. But
Hmm.
I also try to allow myself to challenge what it looks like. So, for example, let's say somebody seems like they're in a bad mood to you, and they might behave a little more distant. So, like, we're in the checkout aisle, and the person kind of gives me like a look, or they look kind of down, right? And I might make a snap judgment. Oh, they're a sad, miserable person, right? That's that's what my bias says. You were looking down, but you kind of scruffed at me or grunted at
Hmm.
me. I could look at you and be like, "Yo, what the hell's the matter with you? Why are you acting like that?"
Hmm.
But had I taken a second and said, "You know what? Maybe it wasn't about me.
Hmm.
Maybe it's some stuff that they got going on, right?" If I had talked to that person, not saying you have to talk to all these people, but
Hmm.
had I talked to them, maybe I might have realized that they just lost their home, or they
Hmm.
just lost their job, or their child is in the hospital. And so they're struggling right now just to make it day to day. That context matters. Now, you don't always get that context because you're not going to talk to every person to learn that about them. But if I just consider maybe this isn't the way it appears to me, maybe it's not, I can have more peace. I can be more patient. I can give more grace to people the same way that we want it because we all go through stuff. You know, maybe I'm going to need that too. So let me make sure that I'm giving out here what I
Hmm.
want to receive. Let me give it first. I want grace. So I'm going to give it to you.
Hmm.
I want patience. So I'm going to give it to you. I want good understanding and good communication. So I'm going to give it to you.
Yes.
Not you give it to me and then I'll figure out when I'm going to get back to you. No, man, that's not how that works.
Hmm.
So I just think it's one of those things that we need to be much more conscious of. Things aren't always the way they appear. And if we consider that maybe we're wrong sometimes, maybe we'll have less tension and friction in our lives overall. I don't know if you would agree with that.
100%. Like you're right. Like we have to be open to be wrong. Like just be open, and like and not be so attached to this idea. Like it is important for you to just allow it to happen, and it's important to remember that you what you want to get, you got to give. Like Ajay said, it's important. Like that. That's really what it boils down to. Um, and yeah, honestly, you're speaking facts, bro. Like I don't have to tell
Thank
you,
you.
you're speaking facts. Like no,
No,
stop.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, these are things I spend a lot of time thinking about, because of the work I do. And then,
Mm-hmm.
combining that with my own lived experiences, I'm like, man, I just want us as people to just treat each other better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easier if you look at it from a lens of, I want that from you.
Mm,
Right. So then let me consider giving that to you then first. Like I don't know you. So I don't want to expect the worst from you. I mean, some people do, but I don't want to expect the worst from you.
mm,
So let me treat you like I would treat anybody else and give you that opportunity first instead of assuming that you're going to do the worst by me.
mm,
And maybe I might find that in the future, my interactions with people are generally more pleasant.
mm,
Like maybe I find that I'm kind of moving through life a little easier. I'm not like this rigid, tense, guarded, closed up, leave me alone, don't talk to me, I don't want to talk to you. Maybe I don't have to do that. I can be like, no, man, like, talk to me. How's your day? What's going on? I like to do that with just random people. They can be in a grocery store and talking to the cashier or whatever. Like, just having that sort of disposition towards folks. I don't think it's impossible to do. It is hard. It does require intention to do so. But when you start doing it, I think it can lead to more peace than being so frustrated and guarded all the time. You know, I don't know if you've seen that in your lived experience
yeah.
or you
Uh,
know people that are like that, but
Definitely. I definitely both. I know people, and I used to be that same way myself. It's important for us to like search for that peace, because again, like what you put out is what you're gonna get back. So if you're living in distress, if you're living in fear and hate and whatever it is that you're living, you're
Yeah.
most likely going to get that back from the people around you. And even if they don't mean to, even if they're not aware of it. So it's important for us to be intentional and aware of what kind of energy we're putting out there. It's necessary. So if you want people to be peaceful and be kind to you, then you got to make sure you're doing that as well.
Yes, sir.
And you got to, and again, it goes back to making sure you fill up your cup and like search for that peace and make sure you take care of yourself first. It's going to be a lot easier to deal with difficult situations, because I can assure you, you will have difficult situations in your life. Um,
Absolutely.
and what really matters is how we respond. Again, the word respond to those situations. And it's important for us and our whole community to move away from reacting, um,
Yes. Oh, yes.
and begin to respond. Even when things seem like they're not going to work out, even when things were tough, make sure that you're taking a few minutes, even days if you need, to make sure that you respond accordingly.
Yeah.
Because that's going to create a lot of peace in your life. It's going to create a lot
Absolutely.
of peace in the people in your life as well.
Nah, man. Preach, preach, preach. It's so important that we think more about res- think about being responsive instead
Hmm.
of reactionary. Um, because reacting just allows us in that moment. I think I hear people sometimes say, like, well, it's just the emotions were high, so that's why I did what I did. It's like, yeah, I get it. I'm not saying I don't understand
Okay.
how that happened. What I'm saying
Mhm.
is now, but then think about what happened after, though. Then, if this is somebody you value, right? This is how you should get people. If this is somebody you value, right? Now you got to go back and apologize.
Mhm.
Now they have some negative feelings towards you. Do you understand that you didn't have to have that happen? If you just kept yourself under control in terms of taking that moment, take that pause if you need to, and say, you know what, Carlos, I'm really upset right now. I'm gonna go take a walk, man. I'll be back, and then we can finish this conversation if that's cool with you. All right, bet. I'm out. So that way I can go get some clarity, get some peace for a bit of time, come back, re-engage. Let's figure out where the discrepancy is. Let's figure out where we're not on the same page about this issue. And then no apologies needed. Glad we're able to work that out, bro.
Mhm.
Appreciate you. Right? Not, I'm sorry I screamed at you. I'm sorry I insulted you. I'm sorry I called you this name. I'm sorry I hit your car. I'm sorry I, whatever other scenario you want to come up with. I don't have to apologize for none of that. I just say, I appreciate you for giving me the space to be open and honest with you. I'm glad we were able to figure out whatever that issue was, and let's keep it moving forward.
That's it.
Way
Mhm.
easier, man. And
It's
I
way
and I,
easier.
I want us to understand that. And yes, like you said, being reactionary. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. It's very
Mhm.
challenging.
Because you gotta
Something,
get a response.
yeah, and some things happen. Some things are so heinous and so
Mhm.
traumatic that I get it.
Mhm.
But we're talking about more often than not. We're not saying ever, but more often than not, let me choose to be responsive and not react. It's not,
Mhm.
we don't live in black or white thinking, as I would say, or everything or nothing.
Mhm.
There's nuance. So, more often than not, though, let me choose to be responsive because maybe it'll create more peace in my life, as Carlos said. But to bring it back to some positivity, some things that we are hopeful for, I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you for your future, man, and for some of
Yeah,
the goals and maybe ambitions that you have. What are some of the things, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, that you have your sights set on moving forward?
I'm hyped. Okay. So first of all, I'm actually for the next couple of years, I'm focused on continuing to work with the superfood company that I partnered last year. Specifically, though, I've been stepping into the leadership position, specifically the Spanish leadership position, where I'm able to educate and train and coach other leaders in the Spanish community to share the message of health, generational health and wealth with our communities, and do it in an effective way, do it in a way that anyone can actually understand.
Mhm.
That way, we can reach as many people as possible and help our communities get healthy and wealthy at the same time.
Yes.
Um, and using this vehicle, I'm actually working on starting my nonprofit that I'm going to be releasing next year. I'm already talking to moms. I'm talking to other doctors and BCBAs where I'm going to be doing events here in the Valley that I'm going to record so they can be duplicated by other people all over the world.
Got it.
Um, where I'm going to be doing health and fitness with our kiddos because not everyone understands the verbiage, not everyone understands health and fitness, um, and that as deeply as like a lot of the people that I know and a lot of people that I work with. So I'm really excited to get that going and get the events going here in the Valley um,
Awesome.
and really just add value to our community and like promote health and fitness within the autistic community because it's something that's not really common
Hmm.
at all anywhere. Like you
Heard.
can say the U.S., you can say the world. It doesn't matter. It really is not common.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, man. And shout out to you for even being willing to do that type of work. I know I certainly can say I know what it's like to be in a space where you're one of a very few in
Mm-hmm.
the majority, particularly in the field of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I can definitely appreciate, where you're coming from and wanting to create that impact in the different unique ways that you have skill and experience and knowledge. And more importantly, you have the passion. You care about trying to help people from those communities and people who are struggling to manage maybe children who are suffering from autism and how to integrate them better into society and all these other challenges that come with when you have that type of diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
So that's good that you care enough to want to do that type of work. And I'm sure if there's any opportunities to promote and support, what you got going on, that I definitely want you to come back and let's make sure we're all doing everything we can to support those types of missions because the work we're talking about is very hard. None of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that we shared
Time
today
consuming.
is
Yeah.
particularly easy.
Yeah.
Everything we laid out is like it's going to take a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
resources, professionals, people
Mm-hmm.
who just care. So I'm very glad that you have found that type of calling. It seems similar to what I'm doing, and that you're very motivated because I think we're going to need all the help that we can get. So I'm happy for you and proud that you are doing that type of work, man. I hope you keep your head up and keep focused on it as you move
Definitely.
forward.
I appreciate it. I
Yeah,
appreciate
man.
it for sure. For sure.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts or things that you want us or the audience to kind of leave us with before we call it a wrap?
I gotta bring it back to something that I mentioned throughout the call. If you get anything out of this call, as a black male of color, um, is feel your feelings. Please, please, please feel your feelings. Find space, find the people that allow you to do that, but make sure that you are feeling your feelings. Because if you don't, then we're going to perpetuate all of this suffering and hate and pain that our communities have been experiencing for decades, if not hundreds of years.
Hmm.
We need to move into healing, and it's important for us, and it starts with us, and it starts with filling your cup first. So feel your feelings.
Absolutely, man. I could not say that any better. That is definitely a place to start, whether you have
Hmm.
a professional that you're working with or not. Also, you can journal as a part of
Hmm.
feeling your feelings. I think that's
Yes.
definitely a great way to add to that. But I thank you a lot for being here, for making the time, for being vulnerable. That's largely, like I said, what the platform is about, and hopefully normalizing these discussions more and more and more.
Hmm.
I hope that if you're a listener or you're watching this right now and you've gained some value, please like this information, subscribe, promote it, encourage it across the board. I think it's very important. We're a very small minority within these minorities trying to have these discussions, engage with people that look like us. Not that, again, that it's against anybody else, but it's really to speak to us because there's not a lot of us that do this type of work.
Hmm.
But I appreciate you for being here, man. And
Sure.
I'm going to say that we are going to be signing off. So thank you all for listening and watching. I'm RJ. This is the IWS podcast, and we're going to call it a wrap. Peace.